Moments ago, this post on Truth Social, perhaps the key line is the first sentence. We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. And he seems to say American equipment is overcoming Iranian defenses. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at the White House. First and foremost, what do we make of that post? And just before we came on the air, the president put it up there about we having control of the skies over Iran.
Dana, that word is the central point there. We, of course, joining the longtime ally of the U.S., Israel, but using that construction, we, certainly implies that the United States is working in a partnership, in cooperation with Israel. And now this is the most declarative thing that the president has said yet about the question that is hanging over this entire debate here at the White House. The president, of course, flying back overnight to Washington from the meeting of the G7 leaders in Canada. He believed that this was an urgent moment that he needed to be back here for. Just a few moments ago, Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived here at the White House. So we do believe that there will be that meeting convening at some point in the Situation Room. But again, the central question, how directly will the U.S. be involved in ferreting out and perhaps destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities? That is really a central question, not only for the Trump foreign policy, but certainly for the world. And this is something that the president, when he was being sworn into office on Inauguration Day, he talked about being a peacemaker. He talked about ending long wars. Of course, that has been the anthem of his really last 10 years in American political life here. But by saying we, that clearly is implicit there. But he's also responding to the vice president, to J.D. Vance, who offered some commentary just a short time ago as well, pushing back against this growing divide inside the MAGA movement. Some supporters of the president believe the U.S. should not be involved at all. And a very interesting window into part of the administration's thinking coming from Vice President Vance. Let's read a part of it together. He says this, speaking of the president, he may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. The vice president goes on to say, and of course, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglement after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. But I believe the president has earned some trust on this issue. Well, boy, Dana, there is a lot packed into that. Of course, 25 years would include the Bush administration and beyond. And this is the central question facing this president now. Is he going to engage and get the United States engaged in a wider war? Or is he going to essentially watch from the sidelines with perhaps a bit of help? But we do believe that those decisions will be made in the coming hours, beginning with a meeting in the Situation Room at some point this afternoon.
Before I let you go, Jeff, I just want to underscore, because a lot has happened like in the last 10 minutes, but I want to underscore that last point that you made. And that is that the Vice President of the United States is not only speaking for the White House here, but he's clearly speaking to the president's MAGA supporters who are really pushing him not to get involved, because they're saying, remember, you're an America First guy. And it is Vance who has historically been one of the leading voices opposed to the U.S. getting involved in foreign conflicts. It really was a remarkable, lengthy post that he put out for many reasons, but especially the internal GOP politics.
It certainly was. I mean, in one hand, it's sending a message to the dissenters out there, Tucker Carlson and others who've been critical of the president, and just the idea that the United States would deepen its engagement. So the vice president basically told them to pipe down, and they should follow and trust the president. But Dana, also speaking potentially to divisions inside this own administration. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, of course, has been much less of a disciple of the American First agenda, at least by brand. So it's very interesting that the vice president decided to put out that very lengthy statement before there is really a meeting or before there is a decision. But certainly, I'm told it's designed to quiet the outside dissenters. But even more, he, of course, has a seat at the table here. It's to perhaps push the president in one direction as well. Dana?
Yeah, really, really fascinating turn of events in the last few minutes. Jeff, thank you so much for reporting it and making sense of it for us. And we have a terrific group of reporters here at the table to continue doing just that. CNN's Stephen Collinson, CNN's MJ Lee, Tyler Pager of the New York Times, and CNN's Lauren Fox. I just want to pick up where I just left off, Stephen, with Jeff, and I would even, perhaps go a step further, which is that not only is Vance sending a message to MAGA world, to Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. We'll hear some of what they have been saying in the last 24 hours in a second, but also maybe laying the groundwork for what's to come. Like he knows what's to come, and that's why he's sending that message now.
Certainly, and I think Jeff is right. This is a message to the MAGA world, but it's also a message to Trump and his political conscience. He's saying effectively, you can go ahead and still be compatible with everything you've stood for. Remember in 2016 campaign, the moment that the president took down Jeb Bush, it was over the Iraq war. He said it was a big fat mistake. You got sucked into a war that was a forever war that didn't end. It's hard to say how, it's so endemic to Trump's appeal when you talk to people at Trump rallies, the idea that those days are gone. Yet Trump, if he goes ahead, we don't know how it's going to end up. It could start with shock and awe. It will have all sorts of reverberations. He becomes the interventionist that he always decried. And that's why there's so many splits right now in the Republican Party and the MAGA movement.
And one of the most interesting sentences from that long statement we saw from the vice president, I thought, was where he said he is only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. I mean, Dana, that is not an outright rejection of the use of the American military. It actually sure sounds like he is priming the American public for the possibility of the U.S. getting directly involved. We're not saying that we know for sure this is going to happen, but all of the body language that we are seeing from this lengthy statement certainly suggests that this possibility is very much out there. I mean, you couple that with President Trump suddenly deciding to cut short a foreign trip, and a lot of signs are headed in that direction. I will just say one reason that I think this just is so remarkable, the possibility, the potential of this kind of intervention, is that President Trump, as a candidate and right before he was sworn in, was so determined to not have wars on his plate as he was getting sworn in. He didn't want the war in Ukraine. He certainly didn't want the conflict in Gaza. He didn't want this war to be fully blown out between Israel and Iran. And now here he is, a couple days in, with the fires being exchanged, seriously, apparently contemplating the possibility of the U.S., as Stephen said, becoming an interventionist country.
And Tyler, as I bring you in, because you cover the White House on a daily, minute-by-minute basis, I do want to bring back what we started with at the top of the hour, which is a brand new post from the president himself, where he said, we now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA.
Yeah, and I think this is part of this effort we've seen the president and his allies laying about how this fits into the America First policy. He's under fire from some critics, Tucker Carlson chief among them, and here we see him fashioning about how this is America First. I mean, the two things, MJ, just to add on to what you were saying, not only did he not want these wars, his inaugural address was all about being a peacemaker, peace through strength. We've talked to sources who said he's very obsessed with winning the Nobel Peace Prize. So it's not only remarkable that he doesn't want more conflict, it's that he's inserting the U.S. potentially into a greater conflict there. And I also think one of the things that's interesting, MJ, from the point that you just read of the vice president's statement, is that sounds a lot like former presidents justifying previous military actions, that actions overseas are in part to protect American interests, not just at home, but all around the world. And so it's just so interesting to see that language being used by two politicians who have made their name promising no forever wars, and promising not to engage in additional military conflict.
Right, especially, again, from J.D. Vance, who is effectively the ambassador because he has such credibility with that part of the Republican Party, the newer part of the Republican Party, as opposed to what used to be most of the Republican Party, which is more hawkish.